So a lot of this talk about stability and instability, it sounds really complicated, but actually we all deal with this within our lives. So I wanted to talk about divorce and what happens in the process of a divorce. Now, while it's perfectly possible to be married to somebody and have an affair, that happens all the time. If you meet somebody while you're married and you decide you want to be together, you can't be with each other, you can't start to build a life together unless you have dissolved the life you already had that was bound up within this marriage. Now, when you get divorced, and for those of us who've been divorced, you probably go into it with the best of intentions and they get explosive. They get really explosive, because what happens is as you start to go through this actually fairly simple legal process, dissolving this marriage contract that you had made in good faith, and then you had built systems together around this marriage contract on the understanding that you were going to be together forever. You might have had children, you might have bought a house, you might have substantial assets, you've got friends, you've got a life. What happens during this process is, in the process of unravelling the legal contract and getting dissolution of your marriage, in the period where that occurs, all the power dynamics are exposed in that situation. The power dynamics between you and your ex-partner are exposed. The beliefs that you had that formed the basis of agreements where you had children, they have to be renegotiated. And then you find out that actually, even though you want to dissolve, you have really this has exploded and you wanted to kill each other. You will then have to decide what you're going to work together on. You might still have children, so you're still bound with legal responsibilities that are joined and you have to deal with them. And this is incredibly complex. And in this period where this legal agreement that contained all these different assumptions becomes unravelled, they become exposed. And there is a period of time where you have to resolve all these things. And you cannot go from one state to another without it. Unless you're a pure, really good bigamist, and even that's really illegal, and you're still going to have to go through this. You can't shortcut these things. You can go into a divorce with the best of intentions, and then the minute you start unpicking these agreements, you're back at the roots of these agreements, and you're back at the day when you agreed that he could, he was never going to ask you for his limited edition bloody guitar back, and you had agreed that you were going to do this over the kids, and then all of a sudden, you're both having to plan a new life separate, and you have to decide what you're going to work together on. And for a period of time, all these power dynamics are exposed. An institutional redefinition is very much like that. You can't go from one state to another without the agreements that you had unravelling, and then within that process, you have to renegotiate the new power relations and the new situation to find a new agreement. And this is a very tricky process, and we are currently doing this. We're divorcing 27 countries, and the power dynamics around all our institutions domestically are exposed because a lot of them have to be renegotiated. The institutions that mediated inequality, from the political parties to the welfare state institutions, to our benefit system, to our local authorities, all those agreements have to come. We're seeing with the trans rights thing, all these different agreements and power relations contained within equality legislation are becoming exposed, and this is fucking terrible. This is dangerous. And at the point in time where all these power relations and agreements are exposed, we are tremendously vulnerable. We are tremendously vulnerable because power dynamics are exposed and we're not sure of our identity. And the combination of these two things can create serious problems. And unless you have sufficient stabilising structures in place, which we actually do in this country, that's what creates the risk of fascism, because people with easy answers, they drop in and it's like, and when I say that crisis can metastasize here, I mean metastasize. I mean in the period where all these power dynamics are up for grabs, and while we're going through this massive complex renegotiation where we have to find our new identity, we are incredibly vulnerable. We are as vulnerable as you are in the middle of a divorce, except this is a country. And so the reason I am so certain is because I know the way that the power dynamics that underpin the changes that I'm talking about occurred, and I know that that's the baseline that we will find again. And these things can't be undone, and these are the baseline of the rule of law, and we will kind of revert to that, and we will realise why we did that. So that's all we'll have to do, which is why women speaking now is so powerful, because all they have to say is, hi, we're here, those systems exist, we already did that, we didn't have recognition, but we kind of need it now. That's really easy to get, women just have to stand up. But everything else that has to be renegotiated right now is much more messy. You know, in order for us to redefine these institutions and do what we need to do during this period, the existing arrangements we had have to fall apart. And that's where we are at the moment. And the thing that puts us at the most risk is that the people at the centre of things don't know that they've fallen apart yet. So, we have all done this. It's not complicated. We have all been in this situation in one way or another, the end of a relationship, or leaving home. You know, we all do this, and we see this on a small scale in our own lives. But this is it on a big scale for a country.